Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Meenakshi Upreti, and in this episode of the NewsX Vikas Report, we will focus on two flagship welfare schemes of the Prime Minister, focusing on Anaj or food. Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, that's the world's largest free food distribution scheme launched during the pandemic. Over 80 crore people have been provided 5 kg of free wheat and rice per month, which came as a game changer for those reeling under the worst during the pandemic. The second Yojana in focus is the One Nation, One Ration card that allows beneficiaries covered under the National Food Security Act to access their ration from anywhere in the country just by holding one card. Over the next 1 hour, we will show you the impact of the scheme on the ground and how IT-driven systems have been roped in for public welfare. And we'll also discuss the road ahead as far as food for all in our country is concerned. Before we open it up for a discussion, let's take a look at a crowded market. This is in Dahisar in Mumbai. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana came as a game changer during COVID-19. Let's see how urban families benefited from the scheme in this report.
Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, the Prime Minister's food security scheme for the poor, was a scheme that started in 2020 on the 26th of March for the people of India, and the scheme aims to feed the poorest citizens of India by providing grain through the public distribution system, which we see that the program is operated by the Department of Food and Public Distribution under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs. And the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana provides 5 kg of rice or wheat according to the regional dietary preferences per person and 1 kg of dal to each family holding a ration card. And talking about the scenario that we saw during the pandemic, where people across the nation had to face several problems, but the poor of the poorest had no food to eat, and under the scheme we see that people were given 2 to 3 kg of wheat, rice and dal for their 2 meals a day. And this is somewhere that helped people survive throughout the pandemic. I have got Mr. Durgesh Pandey with me, who runs such shop under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and provides wheat and rice and dal to the poor residing in the slums. Let us talk to him and try to find out. Durgesh Pandey जी, सबसे पहले तो ये बताइए कि ये स्कीम जो है, इस दुकान को आप कब से चला रहे हैं और इस पूरे पैंडेमिक?
मैं दुकान को 2004 से चला रहा हूँ।
और ये जो प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण योजना शुरू किया गया था, इसके चलते जो 2 और 3 रुपए किलो गेहूं चावल मिल रहे हैं, ये स्कीम कब से चला रहे हैं?
ये 2019 से चालू हुआ था, जब कोविड का 2019 मार्च से चालू हुआ था।
बिल्कुल। और कैसा रहा, मतलब पूरे पैंडेमिक में लोगों के, हम देख रहे थे लंबी कतार जो है यहाँ पर लगी रहती थी, काफ़ी दिक्कत हुए लोगों को?
लंबी कतार होती है, दिक्कत तो नहीं हुई लोगों को, क्योंकि लोगों को वहाँ पे राहत मिला है, कहीं ना तो कहीं पे
राहत मिली है।
हाँ जी।
और अगर किसी को जो गरीब हैं, अगर उन्हें आकर यहाँ पर राशन लेना रहे तो क्या क्राइटेरिया है, क्या उन्हें प्रूफ देना पड़ता है तो उन्हें राशन मिलता है?
तो आधार कार्ड देना है अपना और राशन कार्ड का प्रूफ देना है, बस।
मोदी जी राशन जो दिया था लॉकडाउन में, तो हम लोग को घर में खाने का भी नहीं था, लेकिन आज हमारे बच्चे लोग ने जी लिया, 2 साल तक राशन पानी दिया, अभी भी दे रहा है और हम लोग खुश भी है। कोई चावल है, राशन हम लोग बना के पका के खा सकते हैं, काम धंधा है नहीं है, फिर भी कुछ ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ता, तेल राशन नहीं रहेगा, तेल भाजी मसाला नहीं रहेगा तो भी चावल पका के नमक डाल के खा सकते हैं। धन्यवाद उनका उतना, और हमारा बहुत तो लोग ने किया है और आगे भी हम लोग सोचते हैं कि हमको राशन पानी मिलते रहे। बस वही मैं बोलना चाहती हूँ कि गरीब लोग के लिए मोदी जी बहुत अच्छे हैं और हमारा यहाँ भी कर रहे हैं, गुजरात में भी कर रहे हैं, सब जगह पे मोदी जी ने बहुत लोग की मदद किया है और अभी भी करेगा, और हम लोग वही खुश है कि हमको राशन पानी प्लीज़ देते रहे।
जब लॉकडाउन लगा था 2 साल का, तभी से लेके अभी तक राशन वालों ने 2-3 रुपये वाला राशन हम लोगों को दिया, इससे हम लोगों को बहुत फ़ायदा हुआ और हमारे घर का राशन चला, और ये बहुत अच्छा मोदी ने काम किया था, जिसकी वजह से गरीबों का अच्छा फ़ायदा हुआ।
जो योजना शुरू की गई थी तो हर महीने आप राशन लेते हैं?
मिला राशन, हाँ मिला है।
और कितना राशन उठाते हैं?
वही हम लोग को देखो 20 किलो से समझो 20-25 किलो के आसपास आता है महीने हाँ में।
और 2 और 3 कितने रुपए किलो है गेहूँ और चावल?
नॉर्मली 2 रुपये किलो वाला तो चावल है, 2-3 रुपये किलो गेहूँ ऐसा है। और बाकी जो
हाँ, ये कब से कितने समय से आप ये सेवा का लाभ उठा रहे हैं?
करीबन समझो ना कम से कम अपना 2012 से 2011-2012 से ऐसा है।
2011-2012 और कोविड-19 के समय में ये आपके लिए कितना ज़्यादा लाभदायक था?
नहीं, हम लोग के लिए तो ठीक, बहुत ही अच्छा लगा क्योंकि हम लोग को हर महीना पर डे और महीने में अपने को मिलता था राशन।
Five kgs of free rice, free wheat for 81 crore people. Literally unthinkable a few years ago that has happened. We just heard testimonials of people on how their lives have changed. We'll open it up for a discussion, being joined by Sanjay Nath Singh, Secretary General, All India Farmers Association, Indra Shekhar Singh, Independent Agri Policy Expert, also with us, Yamini Agrawal, Senior Economist with us, Rajiv Gupta, Senior Economist with us, Himanshu Bhatt, Senior Journalist with us. We also have Kiran Vissa, she is a farmer leader and agricultural expert. Also joining us is Rishabh Gulati, Managing Editor, NewsX from the studio. Rishabh, you just heard and saw that report. Obviously, very, very clear how lives have changed. It's very obvious that in the COVID-19 pandemic, at a time when the world was facing recession, the economies, of course, of major countries was sliding down, India was able to provide food security to everyone, the most vulnerable section from rural areas to urban areas. Very obvious that a large part of the COVID shock was absorbed by the scheme.
Yeah, nobody went hungry. It's not a mean achievement. Just think about it. We had problems about migration from going back home, but nobody went hungry, and that's a huge deal. So I'm just going to put a couple of things in context here of what we are doing and why we're doing it. Right. So there are two things that government talks about. One is One Nation, One Ration card, which tries to do away with bureaucratic, red tape, nonsensical idiocy. That if I have a ration card made in a particular state and let's say I'm from Delhi and I've shifted to Bengaluru, I can't withdraw the ration. Or if the ration card is ration is given for families, units, then my son or my daughter is living in a different place, they can't withdraw the ration. So this thing which is done away with. Now the ministers will tell you that this is cent percent implemented. Now I'll take cent percent with a grain of salt. The other big thing was this concept of giving 5 kgs of grain every month since the pandemic started. I think it's been extended for another year.
Yes.
You can well argue that at least in the 2024 elections it will continue, may not continue much longer after that, but another year is going to continue. It's one of the most expensive schemes of government. 3.5 lakh crores have already been spent on this. But so what are we doing? What was our mission here? And this, you watching the final reports, you'll see a lot more ground reports. This is not meant for a studio discussion only. This is meant for ground reports. So again, I've repeated this in every telecast. It's a dipstick test. I can't go to 81 crore families and check with them, but I can do a dipstick test with my bureaus and reporters and see what does it come up with. Does it come up with mostly frustrated people that this is not working? Or does it come up with mostly people who are receiving both their ration at the designated rate, as well as the 5 kilos of free grain, as well as the ability to withdraw it everywhere in whatever percentage is required? Your monthly quota you get, you can withdraw the monthly quota wherever you want. So the dipstick test and all the raw feeds that we've heard, which go over and above what we are showing you on television, is telling us that roughly the people on the ground are getting what the government says they're supposed to be getting, and that is not a mean feat. It's a big deal, Meenakshi.
Well, isn't it? Indra Shekhar Singh, Independent Agri Policy Expert, if you could just join us here. End of the day, this dipstick test, as Rishabh is telling us, the anecdotal evidence very, very clearly showcasing how the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana, the integrated food scheme as it's called now, has worked and has touched the last person, underprivileged sections of the society, not just in rural, but also in urban areas, as we just showed.
First of all, thank you very much, and a happy new year to everyone, all the panelists and all the viewers watching at home. See, the critical thing is, and I'm going to take this in the agri space, it's very good that the government provided nutritional security to about 80 crore people. It's phenomenal. Now, there must be implementation gaps, I agree to that, but the initiative and intention was good. But what's happening right now, it's slightly more tricky and slightly more complex. Okay. And it goes beyond the politics, not Congress or BJP. Please, this is agriculture. So when they shift gears, what they've done is from free ration, they've moved to a scheme under the National Food Security Act of providing subsidized rations.
Yes.
Now you see the shift here. Earlier, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana had dals in it, but the new amendments don't have dal in it. So now it's only paddy, wheat, and a cereal of choice. It's no longer dal. So it makes a very big nutritional effect on the family's nutrition health. Okay, point number one. Second, right now what's happening, India is in a very precarious situation because last year the wheat harvests were bad, the paddy harvests were below average, and Rishabh and everyone have covered this issue extensively. Imagine what happens if again we get a bad wheat harvest and followed by a bad paddy. Our strategic food reserves are at the minimum right now. They are marginal, and these are government figures. These are not some figures that have collected independently. All of this is stated by the government. So imagine if this act is in play. Everyone, 80 crore people need rations through it. Keep that in mind, 80 crore people. Okay. Now we have 2 more bad harvests. That means that this act will push the markets towards inflation. There will be a subdued MSP, which will have a problem for farmers later. The third big issue, and I can touch upon these in a little later also, the third big issue is what happens to the vulnerable groups, women and other vulnerable groups, growing children who are right now being given ration for 1 year more. But what happens after that 1 year is over? Will they still get the rations for free? Will the scheme still work? I think these are the 3 important issues that I'd like to contribute right now, and then come back to other issues.
But hasn't Rabi crop production shown a significant improvement? Sanjay Nath Singh, if you could come in here, sir. I mean, it was a tough season. You had erratic rains. But with this improvement, do you think it's going to be beneficial for the farmers as well? Because they could also end up getting a better price for their produce?
Thank you for having me on the show, and Happy New Year to all the panelists and the team in NewsX. Well, it is a definite, I would say, advantage to the farmers with the better production. There's no doubt on that. But as my panelists said before me, that what if we have another bad harvest, maybe the next one or even later, then where would the food security go? It's with great endeavor of the farmers that we reached a situation of, at one point of time, of over 300%, more than what strategically we required of food grains, food grain reserves.
Yeah.
We can't keep that 300% for all times to come. If we have to continue supporting our poor population with
but sir, for another year, considering this is a surplus you're talking about, for another year if the scheme is extended, because nobody knows after 2024 if the scheme will be extended or not, but till 2024, do you not think that it could be possibly a win-win both for the farmers and of course for the underprivileged sections of the society, sir?
You see, for the underprivileged sections of the society, definitely it's been a great advantage, especially through the pandemic. And all said and done, the economy has not come back or bounced back to the same levels that it was at prior to the pandemic.
Right.
But the point is that how long can the government also continue? Because
yes, we don't know how long is the government going to continue, and since you're speaking of the economy not bouncing back completely, Yamini Agarwal, if as a senior economist you could come in here, many may say yes, the government needs to think of financial prudence. End of the day, it's one of the most expensive schemes which has ever been launched. But should we only have a very myopic view when we are speaking of financial prudence? Should it only be about fiscal prudence right before, of course, the penultimate budget before the polls? Or should we look at it from a broader point of view? End of the day, would you not see, or would you not say that we also need to analyze how the impact of the COVID-19 shock was to a large extent reduced because of the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana?
Well, I think it's very important, as you've raised a question, that it should go beyond fiscal prudence, which I think it did go. When you talk about the COVID time and the Garib Kalyan Yojana and giving ration for free, I think the fiscal deficit went to 9.5 and which ultimately went to 13%. Also, the further fiscal deficit which they were targeting with the future targets were at 6.8%. So they did not keep the targeted level of 3%, which is, estimated or a fiscally prudent measure which the government should have kept. What is necessary is to see that the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana was able to accommodate for the most vulnerable society at a point of time when the COVID situation was at peak and there were different waves, especially in a very densely populated economy. There was no dearth of medicines, there was no dearth of food, and agriculture was the only sector which was growing at a positive growth rate. Also, at the same time, the economy was able to cope up with the lockdowns as well as provide for the vaccination of people. So when you look at all these particular aspects and the way it has managed it, I think clearly
it makes sense if you take a holistic view and don't just concentrate on the so-called fiscal prudence when it comes to the budget. But Rajiv Gupta, as a senior economist, what would you say? Many economists, of course, have flagged the amount of money which goes into the scheme. Two other panelists have already spoken about inflation. Yes, it's true that global food prices are going high. Inflation is a massive concern, but the world is also speaking of food security at the moment. G20 is around the corner. India will be heading the presidency for G20, and we're all speaking, India is batting for food security. Is it not extremely important that we look beyond just numbers, just fiscal prudence and these possibilities of inflation and think of the larger welfare, the larger good of the society? Rajiv Gupta.
Well, my view is very simple. When it comes to starting these things, they were done at the time of COVID. So I look at it like this, that, when there is a problem in the society and somebody who's governing the society, he has to ensure that everybody is kind of taken care of. So largely, if you really look at it, that was the objective, that everybody is taken care of. And we were very, very different in the way we tried to take care of people as compared to the West. So people were putting money in the hands, like the US and West was putting money in the hands of people. Here we said that we have a large set of vulnerable set of people, and we should be able to ensure that at least they have 2 square meals a day. So that was the objective with which it was done, and absolutely with Yamini, where she said that fiscal prudence at that point of time was probably less important because there were a much larger issue at hand that people should be going hungry. So that is where the whole thing was. Unfortunately, many times what then happens is that once things are done, they become extremely difficult to withdraw because, people get used to certain things. Now, we are talking about a huge thing. I think the cost of this thing is something about 80,000 crores a year, something of that tune, which is a fairly large percentage of our overall, overall budget allocations. And, India is a country which is needing money on all fronts. I mean, we need to put money on education, we need to put money on health, we need to put money on a lot of things. So at this point of time, I feel again that, as a good, I put this analogy, there used to be kings in the past and they would kind of take care of their sort of praja in a certain manner, right? I mean, and of course that praja has to be taken care of in a certain manner and provided for things. But one should also be prudent in terms of when to be able to withdraw some of these.
So you're saying that it needs to be withdrawn at some point of time. But Himanshu, but if we analyze and look at the impact it has had on ground, I mean, of course, we at NewsX have tried to do a survey. The number of people we spoke to, of course, nothing as compared to the total number of beneficiaries. There's no way to reach 81 crore people as the government claims. But as a senior journalist, someone who covers Gujarat very extensively, have you seen any difference on the ground? And I don't mean, politically. Yes, politically it's a game changer. It has rewarded the BJP. But when it comes to the lives of the underprivileged, of the poorer sections of the society, Himanshu Bhatt.
Poorer sections of the society have benefited out of this since the pandemic. Since 2019-20, when it started, people are having a real benefit on ground of these schemes. Just imagine, just imagine. Before COVID started, everybody was purchasing a wheat at a kg of 35 rupees. 35 rupees. That is even today's price. When they get it for 2 rupees, the amount of money with no employment that the person saves was huge and enormous. One needs to understand that. And when people were talking, these benefits, when they are withdrawn, it is very, very hard to digest. And for an underprivileged society, it is very, very hard to digest. But there is a way which probably the government has already thought of. And the way could be, you continue with these subsidies with the added tag of Shramadhan going with it.
Okay.
Now, this is a very old concept of Shramadhan. But when one can regulate 81 crore people in India and provide them with this food security. When you talk of food security, this is what we are talking. This is a humongous work that we have done. It's as big as entire Europe, feeding entire Europe. So when you can do that, you can also tag it along with Shramadhan. And the fiscal deficit, let's not talk of it right now. Let 2024 go. And the fiscal deficit with the Shramadhan, along with it the benefits of Shramadhan, indirect benefits of Shramadhan. What will recur will bring fiscal deficit down to manageable proportions. We are not talking of 3% fiscal deficit. We are talking of about 7%, 8%. It's okay for such a huge country like India. And that people need to understand that. Don't keep on shouting the fiscal deficit.
Yes, exactly, and that's what that's exactly that is another point of view as well. Yes, fiscal deficit, one must be prudent of that, one must be mindful of that. But do we need to look at such welfare schemes with a more holistic point of view? That also is a very pertinent point, sir, which you have raised with a very constructive solution. But Kiran Visa, if you could come in here, 2 agri experts have said that this scheme could eventually lead to inflation. But then there is another line of thought, many who say that farmers are also benefiting from the scheme. End of the day, their produce is also getting picked up by the FCI at a good enough rate and is being given to the poor for free.
Yeah, so I think firstly we need to clarify something about what really happened in the last 1 week, right? The announcement of the central government has been to withdraw the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana.
And yes.
Which was,
subsume and reduce, get rid of the subsidy and subsume it and make it into one scheme. Yes.
Right. But I think we don't seem to be, really dwelling on that point.
Okay.
See, as of yesterday, as of December 31st, per head, the poor people were getting 10 kg of grain, right? And as of January 1st, they are only getting 5 kg of grain, right? That's basically the bottom line. Of course, the 5 kg of grain, they were already getting from the 2013 Food Security Act, National Food Security Act, which came under the UPA government, right? But under that act, they were getting it at 2 rupees per kg for wheat and 3 rupees per kg for rice. Now, that is being provided free. So I think that there is a kind of a conflation of these two things. The 5 kg extra free rice or wheat that was provided due to the pandemic has now ended. So I think all the people that we are talking, right, to that your crew also has talked to, I'm not sure they have really realized that now they are going to get only 5 kg.
So I think the Economist, sir, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, and I'll go back to the Economist also. The 5 kg, just one point I want to add here, sir, I'll let you complete. Yes. I'm just interrupting you in interjection for a clarification. I think the Economists who are speaking of fiscal prudence as well, I think they are upset and against the 5 kg free grains as well, because they feel it could eventually affect the economy. But yes, very pertinent point. Anyway, it has been happening from 2013. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So, see, the marginal additional burden, because you reduced it from 2 rupees to 0 rupees, right? Actually, that is very marginal.
Right.
Compared to the 5 kg extra grain that has been given during the pandemic. And even during the pandemic also, I think it was given in phases, and for 6 months it was not given, and so on. I think one point I wanted to make is that I'm not sure the people that we are talking to on the road, on the street, have actually realized that they'll only get 5 kg grain from this month, as opposed to 10 kg that they are getting. And I think their reactions might be very different. See, as a person who is working with the poor, both in the rural and urban, my take would be that actually the food security system needs to be strengthened and not weakened, right?
Okay.
So, of course, the 2013 Act, which was giving 5 kg of grain, I think was a good beginning. But actually, to really ensure nutritional security, we need to provide more grain. I think that at least 7 to 8 kg per head will be required to meet a basic minimum nutritional security. Secondly, dal and oil also need to be provided. See, that is when it will actually become a full food basket.
Yeah.
But I would say personally, I'm disappointed that rather than moving in the direction of strengthening the food security, the central government has now moved back. That actually they cut down the dal, 1 kg of dal, and they also cut down the 5 kg of grain. I think that this will have an adverse impact on the national security because even recently, I think that even the WHO report that came out and the United Nations, the UNDP report that came out on the nutrition shows that India is not really doing well.
But I'll tell you what, that scheme, sir, the scheme you are referring to, the scheme you are referring to, the parameters with which they measure nutrition itself, there seems to be a very, some discrepancy and some disconnect with the ground reality in India. But that's another debate for another day. The food security survey, the UNDP survey you are referring to, but yes, you've made some very interesting points and we'll discuss them further. But, the idea of the telecast was to look at how the people have benefited or not from the scheme. Let's take a look at a ground report. My colleagues have filed it from Haryana. This is now in Haryana. It's a village and our colleagues have travelled there. The people are telling us how they have benefited from the PM-JKY Yojana. We also spoke to a section of Muslim families. They've also spoken to us. Let's take a look at this report.
प्रधानमंत्री अन्न योजना के तहत आज हम पहुंचे सरकारी दुकान पर, जहां पर लोगों के अगर देखा जाए क्योंकि राशन लेने वाले लोग काफ़ी लाइन यहाँ पर लगी हुई है और बीपीएल परिवार वाले भी यहाँ पे हैं जो कि यहाँ पर राशन लेने के लिए सरकार दुकान पर हैं। तो हमारे साथ दीपो धारक है, उनसे हम बात करेंगे आखिर किस तरह का उनको राशन दिया जा रहा है और कितना राशन उनको दिया जा रहा है, कितना उनसे पैसे लिया जा रहा है। जी, क्या नाम है? डिपोल्टर आप ही हो जी। कितना राशन इनको दिया जा रहा है बीपीएल कार्ड को?
जैसे जितना बीपीएल का जैसे कार्ड 2 होते हैं, एक AAY का हो सरकार फिक्स देती है, चाहे उसमें 1 यूनिट हो या 10 जो फ्री आता है, जितनी यूनिट होती है वो फ्री दिया जाता है।
तो अगर गेहूं की बात करें तो गेहूं का कितना लिया जाता है पैसा इसमें?
गेहूँ 2 रुपये किलो।
2 रुपये किलो। और चीनी?
चीनी है 13 रुपये 50 पैसे।
और तेल भी आ रहा है?
तेल नहीं है।
क्या क्या सामान आ रहा है?
चीनी और बाजरा और ये 3 चीज़।
तो ये कंटिन्यू बांट रहे हैं आप इसके?
हाँ जी, कंटिन्यू।
कैसा राशन कार्ड आपका?
सही राशन आ रहा है।
राशन कार्ड कौन सा है? बीपीएल है।
हाँ।
कितना राशन मिल रहा है आपको?
अब मेरा आपका विराट आदमी 2 मन दे रहे हैं।
2 मन। और क्या क्या सामान मिल रहा है आपको?
और सामान चीनी भी आ रही।
अच्छा, तो कितने पैसे आपसे लिए जा रहे हैं?
पैसे 1 कोटे के लेते हैं, 1 से ना ले।
कितने ले रहे हैं?
50 भी दे दें, कई बार 20 भी दे जाए, ना हो तो 70 भी दे जाए, ऐसे दें।
कैसा राशन कार्ड है आपका?
मेरा बीपीएल है।
बीपीएल। कितना राशन मिल रहा है आपको?
वो 5 किलो के हिसाब से मिल रहा है, यूनिट के हिसाब से।
अच्छा अच्छा, कितना पैसा दिया जा रहा है?
2 रुपये किलो।
2 रुपये किलो के हिसाब से।
बाजरा भी आपकी बार आया है, बाजरा क्या रेट दे रहे हैं?
बाजरा का वही रेट 1 रुपये किलो। 1 रुपये किलो मैंने अभी लिया नहीं, मैं तो लाइन में लग रहा हूँ, पहली बार ही आया तो बाजरा।
अच्छा अच्छा, तो जिस तरह से प्रधानमंत्री ने ये राशन जो कि 1 साल के लिए फ्री किया है, तो कैसा लग रहा है आपको?
बहुत बढ़िया लग रहा हो जी, बहुत बढ़िया टाइम कट रहा हो जी, और गरीब आदमी इनको अच्छा गुजारो हो।
All right, those were of course the voices of the people from the ground, many of them, most of them from Haryana, and most of them belonging to the minority community. Very, very obvious that the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas slogan which has been given is something which has been implemented on ground as well when it comes to the government schemes. But I'd like to of course go back to the economists on the panel, and we'll talk about fiscal prudence. That's something which we were discussing earlier as well. and then we will of course take this further and open it up for a discussion. So, I'd like to go across. Let me go across to Rajiv Gupta, because Rajiv Gupta, you had mentioned this point about fiscal prudence, and that's something which I'd like to talk about. End of the day, the last panelist also made, that was Kiran Vissa, made a very important point about the amount of ration which has been given. It's anyway been reduced. From 10 kgs, it's 5 kgs. Two schemes have obviously been subsumed and turned into one. How is it, or what makes you so wary of the scheme now?
No, to me, as I said, see, I just said that certain things which are started for a specific purpose should be used for that purpose. And then
no, but sir, that's been used, right? We've gone back to the 2013 model. Any which way, it's 5 kg and not 10 kgs of rice.
But it is 5 kg of free this thing rather than whatever was being charged. So, to my understanding, you see, the more you kind of start subsidizing things, it creates more and more complexity in terms of how we handle the entire society. There is also other impacts that are likely to happen. Many times, there are people who are not ready to work. There is a huge shortage of labor that is happening. People are not ready to come back to work in many places because they are at subsistence.
But are we not giving? I think we're not giving enough credit to the underprivileged section of the society. I take your point, Yamini Agrawal. If you could jump in here, how would you want to react to this? That if you give free stuff, then people just lose the will to work. Is that the case? Because end of the day, would you not say once again? As I said earlier, we need to look at these schemes from a bigger and a more holistic point of view.
Well, I think it's important to see these schemes overall in terms of the benefit that the underprivileged or the most vulnerable group receives. And specifically when these schemes come during pandemic, when people have lost jobs or when people don't have a way of earnings, then these schemes are more useful. Well, overall, these schemes should also be providing a provisioning for the vulnerable groups who are not able to reach the sustenance level. But to say that people will not come back to work may not be possible because, the overall welfare in the scheme is not so much for them to keep away from, a healthy work environment that is there. But it does, somewhere or the other, if the scheme is such that people feel that I am happy with this particular sustenance level of food, then they may not want to work. But I don't feel that the overall welfare of this particular scheme or any of the other schemes is such is of a magnitude that tells them that they don't work.
No, but anyway, you have panelists who are saying that the scheme should actually be increased. 5 kg of rice is not enough. In fact, Sanjay Nath Singh, if you could come in here, do you not think, sir, it's going to be beneficial to the farmers as well? Earlier, you raised the issue of inflation. But again, as many say, end of the day, the government feels the farmer also could benefit substantially from these schemes. What do you have to say about that?
You see, the farmers will definitely benefit in the sense that they'll get a secure market to sell the produce. But at the same time, the government is also trying to increase their income levels by giving them more avenues to sell their produce. So, and I feel that that if you look at it holistically, and we have, I have personally been to many villages in Uttar Pradesh, and I have realized that in many of these village households, which are under BPL, there are some families which are actually under BPL, and there are many families, influential families in the villages, which are misutilizing this scheme, and they are actually they're getting. Per family member, they are getting this kind of quantity, which is probably much more than what they can consume themselves. So there is a misutilization as well, and the children are not.
But sir, how much can one misutilize? I mean, it's end of the day, just 5 kgs. This is Kiran Vissa. I wish I could take you in once again, but I have to move to the other part of the story as well. It's just 5 kgs. To what extent? Okay, Kiran Vissa, I'll take one point from you because you wanted the ambit of the scheme to be increased. Here is another point of view which says people are misusing. How can they misuse? End of the day, it's just 5 kgs of rice. It's not even the bare minimum.
330 grams of grain per head is the basic nutrition that is required, and we are talking only about the cereal. We are not talking about the protein and fat, oils and dals, right? So that itself will come to close to 10 kg is the minimum requirement, as per the whatever scientific guidelines. So providing only half of that. And saying that, if they're getting 5 kg of rice, then they won't go to work, I think it's completely misplaced.
Yeah.
I would totally disagree with that. Secondly, working with farmers, right? So we actually welcomed when the dals were also included in the PDS, because essentially what India really needs is a revolution in increasing the production of dal and pulses and oil seeds, and gaining self-sufficiency in that, and which means that the farmers need to have a secure market and a remunerative price for that. And we've been demanding that actually the whole minimum support price system should be guaranteed for all the 23 crops. It's announced for 23 crops, but only rice and wheat are, really there's an intervention from the government, because the PDS is limited only to rice and wheat. So these things are all linked, and we really feel as a farmers organization that the nutritional basket should be widened. And in fact,
there's no doubt, but the PMJKY is only for rice and wheat, and the point of dal, etc. being included, that's something which others in the panel have also emphasized on. But end of the day, step in the right direction. We have, of course, basic wheat, rice, basic grains at least reaching free of cost to the poorest of poor sections in the society. It may be very easy for all of us to debate, sitting in our ivory towers. End of the day, roti, kapda, makan, stuff which we take for granted, that's something which many in our country can only dream of. In fact, there are two aspects to, this entire discussion. One, of course, was the free food subsidy. The other being the one nation, one ration card. Now, that has been a life simplifier for both the people and shopkeepers. We filed multiple reports on the ground to understand the impact of this as well. First of all, let's take a look at this report from Jhansi in Uttar Pradesh.
प्रधानमंत्री वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड के तहत हम झांसी पहुंचे हैं और झांसी में नगरा में इस समय मौजूद हैं और यहाँ पर एक राशन की सरकारी दुकान पर हैं और यहाँ जानेंगे किस तरीके से इस राशन का वितरण होता है और कितना वितरण होता है, इसके लाभार्थी कौन होते हैं। हमारे साथ हैं बातचीत करने के लिए यहाँ के जो दुकान के हैं ऑनर हैं, उनसे भी बात करेंगे, जानेंगे कि किस तरीके से इस राशन कार्ड का इस्तेमाल होता है और किस तरीके से यहाँ लोगों को इसका बेनिफिट मिल रहा है। क्या नाम है आपका?
हमारा नाम राम बाबू
जी। वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड का जो है आपके पास कई सालों से आप ये काम कर रहे हैं, तो किस तरीके से इसका वितरण होता है, क्या है?
वन नेशन वन कार्ड का मतलब ये है कहीं का भी कार्ड जो है कहीं से भी राशन ले सकता है, कहीं का भी कार्ड कहीं से भी राशन ले सकता है। जो कार्ड हमारी मशीन की प्रॉक्स मशीन है उसके तहत इसमें जो भी चलते हैं वो कहीं से भी कहीं का भी कार्ड आ जाए उसको राशन देते हैं।
ऑनलाइन पूरा प्रोसेस है ये?
ऑनलाइन है जी।
कैसे क्या क्या मिलता है
इसमें? NFSA के तहत 2 किलो गेहूँ, 3 किलो चावल जो 2 रुपये और 3 रुपये की दर से दिया जाता है, और प्रधानमंत्री PMJKY के तहत 5 किलो चावल निःशुल्क दिया जाता है पर यूनिट।
कितने लोग होंगे जो इस योजना का लाभ उठा रहे हैं?
हमारे पास तो 300-350 कार्ड हैं, 350 लगभग, और जितने लोगों के पास जितने भी हों, काफ़ी 60-70% से ज़्यादा ऊपर आदमी लेता है, मतलब जो गरीबी रेखा के उसके दायरे में आता है मानक रूप से, वो सभी लेते हैं।
ये हमारे साथ एक लाभार्थी भी हैं जो कि यहाँ राशन लेने आए हैं। आप नाम बताइए।
दिलीप साहब।
किस तरीके का राशन मिलता है यहाँ पर, और क्या ये प्रधानमंत्री की वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड किस तरीके से आप लोग लाभ ले रहे हैं?
जी, जो प्रधानमंत्री योजना है इसमें वन नेशन वन कार्ड है, वो कहीं से भी मतलब ले सकता है। हम तो यहीं के हैं तो यहीं से लेते हैं, और इसमें 5 किलो चावल हर महीने प्रति फ्री, जो बिन पैसे, जो कोई पैसा नहीं लिया जा रहा है प्रधानमंत्री योजना के तहत हम, और जो महीने का जो मिलता है 3 किलो चावल 2 किलो गेहूँ वो भी हमको प्राप्त होता है। ये सब चीज़ों का लाभ हमें हमारे देश में मिल रहा है, और सब 80% जो गरीबी रेखा में जीवन यापन कर रहे हैं उन सभी को ये लाभ मिल रहा है हमारे प्रधानमंत्री और हमारी योगी सरकार की।
गरीबी रेखा के अंदर जो 5 किलो राशन दिया जा रहा है प्रति यूनिट, वो लाभ मिल रहा है। उसमें 5 किलो चावल एक बार में, और एक बार में जो है 3 किलो चावल और 2 किलो गेहूँ मिलता है। पहले 3 किलो गेहूँ मिलता था, अब 2 किलो गेहूँ कर दिया उन्होंने, ये 2 महीने से।
क्योंकि आपको उस कल्याण योजना का जो है वो लाभ मिल रहा है क्या?
हाँ मिल रहा है।
क्या क्या मिलता है उसमें?
चावल अभी मिल रहे हैं फिलहाल। हाँ बस चावल मिल रहे हैं, हाँ फ्री।
कैसा लगता है, मतलब क्या कैसी योजना लगती है आपको?
अच्छी है, बढ़िया है।
तो कब से मिल रहा है ये?
इसी योजना जब कोरोना हुआ तब से बराबर चल रहा है, प्रधानमंत्री वाला।
हाँ मिलता है, फ्री वाले भी मिलता है। हमको 2 यूनिट हैं, 10 किलो देते हैं, और वो वाले में गुलाबी कार्ड है और 20 किलो देते हैं ये राशन। बस।
कब से मिल रहा है
ये अब जब से ये कार्ड बना गुलाबी।
And now finally we move to Fulwari in Patna, where also beneficiaries, predominantly women, tell us how the One Nation, One Ration card has made their lives easier. Let's listen in.
वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड के तहत अब देश के किसी भी कोने में राशन कार्ड पर गरीब तबके के लोगों को जो है 5 केजी मुफ्त अनाज की व्यवस्था की गई है। प्रधानमंत्री द्वारा ये योजना लागू की गई है। अभी हम मौजूद हैं पटना के गोनपुरा पंचायत के हुलास चक में, जहाँ पे कुछ लाभार्थी हमारे साथ हैं जिन्हें जो है प्रधानमंत्री योजना का लाभ मिल रहा है। क्या नाम हुआ आपका?
सविता देवी।
आप लोग को क्या अनाज मिल रहा है?
मिल रहा है, हाँ हम लोग के दम समय से मिल जाता है।
मोदी सरकार आने के बाद
कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, हम लोग के सब मिलता है अच्छा से।
आपका क्या नाम है?
उर्मिला देवी। हाँ राशन मिलना है।
आपका क्या नाम है?
सोनी देवी। राशन महीने महीने मिल जा रहा है।
आपका क्या नाम है?
रामावती।
आपको राशन मिल रहा है?
हाँ सब मिल रहा है। हाँ सर मिल रहा है।
हमारे साथ राजीव रंजन है, पैक्स अध्यक्ष हैं यहाँ पे। इनसे पूछते हैं जो इन लोग को गरीब प्रधानमंत्री योजना के तहत जो है राशन मिल रहा है, वन नेशन वन कार्ड।
हाँ, इन लोगों को अभी जो सरकार की योजना है प्रधानमंत्री का मुफ्त जो है वो 5 किलो चावल फ्री में दिया जा रहा है, प्लस 5 किलो जो रेगुलर मिलता था वो भी मिल रहा है। इन लोगों को अभी टोटल 10 किलो के राशन इन लोगों को मिल रहा है, जो हर महीने आ रहा है और जो कोरोना समय से लागू हुआ है, जो अभी तक निरंतर चला जा रहा है। इस महीने दिसंबर तक है, फिर आगे देखिए क्या होता है। इन लोगों को अभी मिल रहा है और देखिए आगे क्या होता है। आगे प्रधानमंत्री एक्सटेंड करते हैं या फिर क्या करते हैं उस पर देखा जाएगा आगे महीने में क्या घोषणा होती है।
गरीब तबके के लोग हैं जिन्हें कि राशन की ज़रूरत है, मतलब उनके परिवार कम आमदनी है, ऐसे लोगों को मदद की जा रही है।
हाँ बिल्कुल, उन लोगों को बहुत हद तक मदद माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने किया है, क्योंकि जो गरीब तबके के लोग हैं उन लोगों को 10 किलो अनाज अगर प्रत्येक व्यक्ति मिल जा रहा है तो एक खाने के लिए उनको उचित प्रबंध हो जाता है प्रत्येक व्यक्ति को, और खाने के लिए हो जा रहा है। गेहूं का थोड़ा क्वांटिटी कम गया है, अब 1 किलो मिलता है, पहले 4 किलो मिलता था, तो थोड़ा उन लोगों को दिक्कत है क्योंकि गेहूं का रेट जो बाज़ार में है वो ज़्यादा हो गया है। इस कारण थोड़ा गरीब तबके के लोगों को थोड़ा दिक्कत सामना करना पड़ा, लेकिन वो लोग खुश हैं। उन लोगों को खाने का भरपूर अनाज सरकार उपलब्ध करा रही है।
लेकिन इनका कहना है कि जो गरीब तबके के लोग हैं उनको जो है अनाज हर महीने जो है भरपूर जो है सरकार के द्वारा दिया जा रहा है, ताकि उनको किसी भी तरह की परेशानी ना हो। क्या प्रभात के साथ शक्ति, इंडिया न्यूज़, पटना।
Okay, so from the beneficiaries of the PM Kalyan Yojana, as it was called till last year, and of course the One Nation One Ration card, how it has helped the people, that's exactly what we tried to assess. Yamini Agrawal, what do you have to say about the benefits of the One Nation One Ration card? Obviously we spoke to multiple people, many of them migrant workers, many of them non-migrants also. Pilferage reduced, red tapeism refused, win-win really for the government and of course for the beneficiaries.
I think it's a very good scheme, and it has possibly integrated the entire economy and has allowed mobilization of people from one place to another without the fear that they may lose the ability to sustain themselves on the subsidized rations or the other things that are available. Another important aspect is because it helps in mobilization, it brings about greater integration in the labor forces, especially in managing, the requirements of the industry. At the same time, ensuring employment for people from one place to another. So it overall not only takes care of the food requirements of people, but at the same time provides for livelihoods of people and opportunities for the industry to hire at a reasonable rates the labor.
Right, and Rajiv Gupta, if you could come in here, you had some questions and doubts over the PMJKY scheme, now rebranded, of course, a food integrated scheme. But end of the day, one nation, one ration card, at least here you will concede that it's a step in the right direction.
No, that is 100%. No, I think I have been probably not taken in the right spirit.
No, that's fine. Criticism is fine, and you're entitled to the same, sir.
I'm saying, I understand that, but what I'm saying is that, see, the other part also, see, this is definitely something which, technology has kind of made it happen, and it's a step in the right direction, 101%.
Yeah.
However, I still maintain that e-rations is something that I would always be kind of against in terms of, there could be, it has to be, there was, before 2019 also, there was ration being given and there were people surviving, right? I mean, during COVID, yes, 100% it was a correct step, right direction it had taken up. But now, whether it should be continued like that, or whether it should be kind of, the thing is more of,
okay, I've taken your point, sir, and I'm sorry I'm interjecting at this point of time. Himanshu, but if you could come in here, sir, as a senior journalist, I'm sure that you must have seen the plight of migrant laborers during the peak of COVID period. Hundreds of people walking barefoot, hundreds of kilometers, trying to reach home. They had no money, they had no job, they had no way to sustain their livelihoods, they had no way to prove or provide for their family. For those people, one nation, one ration card, schemes like these, the free food, which, 5 kgs of grains which they are getting, these are, of course, a lifesaver, isn't it, sir?
It was a lifesaver. It has proved to be a lifesaver. And I stay in a city which has 20% of workforce of the total population. I live in Surat, where lots and lots of textile and other industries, labor, comes from the places like Orissa, Bihar, and some other places. Now, with this one ration card, one nation theory, now what is happening is, if a male member has come on to Surat, migrated to Surat, he gets his ration on that from Surat, whereas the other members of his family get it from native places. And he comes to Surat only because he earns something more than what he did in his native place. In a native place, when he earned about 25, 30 to 50 rupees a day, here he comes, does the labor job and earns 300 bucks. Now suppose this guy on his old ration card gets the ration which is due. Imagine the amount of money he saves here could be more than 7,000 rupees a month out of his 10,000 earning. And he sends that back to his native place. Now this is what it benefits to the economy. And this, this is the beginning, which is going to go a long way, because one nation, one card theory is going to work, and it is going to slowly bring about equality to all other places. Because we are seeing that the places, urban places, some of the urban places like Surat, where you have no dearth of employment. Those who want to work will always get work on a daily wage basis for up to 500, 700, 1,200, 1,500 bucks. And those are the guys who come from those places in the rural areas of some parts of India where they could not make even 50 rupees a day. Just imagine what effect will it have on the economy when his food security is taken care of.
An important point, sir, and Kiran Vissa, if you could come in here, I know you're an agri expert and I'm going to ask you a question related to IT, but end of the day, it has to be highlighted, should it not, sir, the fact that this government has been able to use technology, IT sector for the greater good. End of the day, look at the one nation, one ration card scheme. Using, of course, technology, the government is able to cut down on pilferage, on red tapeism. End of the day, it is a commendable feat.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that definitely integrating the ration card across the states is a long overdue thing, which is being done. And I think the COVID pandemic has provided a thrust, the compulsion to do that, which is good. And also, I think that the role of the state governments also needs to be looked at in this, because ultimately the implementation is by the state governments. And even during the pandemic, I think some of the state governments did particularly well, like in Telangana, where we were working with the migrant workers. Quickly, some jugaad was done to make sure that even the people who don't have ration cards also get the grains and so on, even before this one nation was put in place. So I think definitely a welcome step. And hopefully this doesn't remain limited only to the ration cards, because I think ultimately the poor need social security system, of which the rations is only one part of it. And also, the kind of medical support schemes or other schemes which are there should also be extended to people who are non-residents, right?
But for that you anyway have, you speak medical, sir, there's anyway the Ayushman Bharat card, which just provide 5 lakh rupee insurance, something which we discussed earlier. So I think this is being extended in various sectors. But yes, government should look at extending it further. End of the day, Sanjay Nath Singh, if you could come in here, it anyway didn't make any sense. Why should there be different ration cards for people living in one country? Sanjay Nath Singh, can you hear us, sir?
Look, it's a great initiative of the government to have one nation, one card, and I think this helps a lot in terms of the economy as well, because the mobility along with the food security assurance is something assured. So a person, as Mr. Gupta also said, that you could people could move around from one place to the other, and it helps the economy. It helps the economy. It helps the people to earn more. If they earn more, definitely, I'm quite sure it will help alleviating the many issues of poor, of poverty, and other needs of the families. So I think it's a great idea, and I think I just wanted to add something which I could not finish earlier.
Okay.
That it's very important that free rations, if it is being provided, should be in the villages, at least in the rural sectors, should be attached to Manrega.
Okay, that's an interesting suggestion which you have to give. Indra Shekhar Singh, since we are speaking about, of course, both the schemes, which is the free ration, which is being provided to the underprivileged sections of the society, and the one nation, one ration card. End of the day, when you look at these two schemes and the testimonies which you have heard, the ground reports which you have seen, very, very clearly show that on ground it's working. On ground, these schemes have been able to change the life of the most underprivileged, the poorest of poor sections in our society.
See, that's, the point is very well discussed also, but I'd like to raise, your view and the audience to a different side.
All right.
When one way we say we are a 5 trillion economy, we are going to be Vishwa Guru and all these things. And on the second hand, 80 crore people in our economy can't earn enough to get their own foods and have to depend on the public distribution system. That's the real test of hunger and how well the economy is doing. That people who produce the food don't have enough money to keep the food and actually take it from the government at subsidized rates. It's a very poor judgment, and I'm being the devil's advocate here, but this is a real question we should all ask ourselves. And of course, fiscal things are very necessary in any economic planning. Look at the case of Zaire from 1960. What the Americans did is they starved out the fiscal reserves of Zaire. They took away all the forex, and then a company called Cargill started to control and dictate what foreign policy Zaire should have. So be very, very smart, because food is not money. Sometimes there is less supply of food because of climate change, because of droughts, because of other reasons. And then people cannot just eat money, you see. So there needs to be strategic reserve.
But sir, what makes you think?
Ma'am, please, in your debate, it was very clearly identified by one of the panelists that the food, we all are for the poor section of society. But this scheme does not help the poor section of society. It cuts their ration, cuts their dal, cuts their oil seeds. So what are we talking about?
You think it's
while
not
you're draining the
benefiting?
economy, you're reducing the nutrition. While you're draining the economy, you're reducing the nutrition, and you have no clear plan of how the farmers are going to be enrolled in this. You see, everything is good in concept, but let's talk details. Let's talk how one part links to the other. And there you find huge gaps.
Okay, I've taken your point. Let me take it across. We're running out of time. Yamini Agrawal, if you could just interject and get in here. You know, since we are speaking about the food security, 5 kg of free grains, many feel is not enough. The ambit should be increased. And on the other hand, you have some economists who say that if you increase it further, if you include anything else, then there's going to be a much bigger fiscal deficit. Really, it's a catch-22. As of now, it looks like me for the government.
Well, I think the government needs to provide for the vulnerable, which does provide for a certain subsistence level of, provision, which is 5 kgs. Beyond that, the food security doesn't talk about nutritional levels here. One needs to clearly identify that. Second important aspect is that the government has secured livelihoods back through vaccination program, which was completely subsidized.
Yeah.
That livelihood section is an important aspect for people to earn their breads, butter, and live for themselves, which was again a complete process after the pandemic that was brought in the economy through the government effort. So I think when we talk about welfare schemes, the vulnerable and the most poorest of the poor people should be reached out.
Yes, and that's exactly what we felt, ma'am, when we went on ground and tried to assess the impact of these schemes. The poorest of the poor seem to be elated. They, of course, in their testimonials claim that they have been receiving free grains from the government for over a year, and they are, of course, looking forward to the same for another year. Of course, it's a debate which has evoked a completely polarizing point of view, so I'm not surprised that it evokes such a feisty debate. But end of the day, the idea of this entire exercise was to gauge and analyze whether people have benefited from the schemes which have been initiated by the government. Anecdotal evidence, dipstick test tells us yes, to a large extent they have been successful. With that, I thank all the guests, and it's a wrap on this extremely riveting and feisty debate.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.